Okay, let's talk a little bit about the rocker drill. The rocker drill is a really cool pitching drill that you can do and use because you can do it very progressively. You can start with something very, very basic, move into something that's a little bit more in depth and requires them to do and perform a little bit more. Uh, Many steps that you can go to make it as advanced as you want. But I'll talk about 3 general steps that you can do. The idea with the rocker drill is you're putting them in a position where their trail leg is where it was, and their lead leg has already landed. So they don't have to do a lot to get to the position where they land in order to make their throw. So I got my rubber here, starting with their back foot on the rubber, and their lead leg squared up to their target. You can have them already out pretty wide. Now, important to understand with the progression of this drill, we want to start first step with that lead foot pretty open, not totally open, pointing to target, maybe not, definitely not more than open, but pretty pointed to target, maybe a little bit closed, but not too closed. If it's too closed, then their rear hip is going to bang into their front hip, and they got nowhere to go. So that lead foot has to be open a little bit, which allows their rear hip to unload energy and come through in order to deliver everything into the pitch. So what we want to do at the first step of the rocker drill, we're going to start with their hands already broke. Okay, rock. Okay, now let's go into that second bit of the rocker drill. Very similar to the first. You're going to have them starting on the rubber. You're going to have them already landed, toe kind of facing forward, but still a little bit closed, not blown open, wide open, not too closed. We got to have space for the rear hip to come through. Now with this one, it's a little bit more based on timing. Yes, there's the rock, and yes, we're still thinking about how that lead leg has to brace or block so that everything in the upper body can come through and deliver all the energy into the throw or pitch. But on this one, we're thinking a little bit more timing in terms of the handbrake. So on this one, they can start here rather than starting here. And what we want them to do is we want them to rock back and figure out when their hands have to break. And it's just a process of, again, a couple demos where they rock back and break, come together, rock back and break, come together, rock back and break, come together. Kids will slowly start to self-correct and start to figure it out on their own. So it's either they're breaking too late and then their arm has to hurry up to get up, or they're breaking too early and then their arm has to stay put and just kind of stall out. What we want is them to have a feeling of continued and gained momentum. It's them discovering, figuring out kind of on their own, what's the timing of when my hands have to break. Break, break, break. Yeah, that feels about right. So as they demo on their own and start to get a feel for when their arm has to break, hands have to break, and arm has to flip up to get into the right position so they can turn into their throw, in a lot of ways they'll self-correct. So have them demo 2 or 3 or 4 times, where they rock back and break, come back to center, rock back and break, rock back and break, and when they're ready, rock back and break, and make their throw. That's the second part of the rocker drill. All right, third part of the rocker drill, and this is the most complex part. You can break it down into 2 different ways. You can have them start with their hands together. You can have them start with their hands apart. But what we're going to add in this one is a little bit more power, a little bit more load of the hips. And rather than starting in that landed position, you're going to get them to turn their heel up so they can feel that their hips are kind of overloading a little bit deeper. Now they got to work really hard with their chin and their head to look past their shoulder to find their target. Hard for me because I got glasses and everything gets in the way. I didn't used to wear glasses when I played or pitched, so I had a lot of vision, but right now it kind of gets in the way. But on this one, what they're going to do is they're going to start with their foot a little bit more closed. A little bit more closed. So yeah, that lead hip is kind of in the way right now. That trail hip doesn't have anywhere to go. So what they're going to do is they're going to overload. They're going to load up here, and as they rock back, they're going to have to turn their lead foot to get that heel down so the front hip can kind of get out of the way so the trailing hip can come through. And it's a timing thing as well, but it's an overloading thing as well to really get them to feel how to generate as much as they can out of their body. And then from there, they can break hands. So you can start with hands apart. So it can be here, loading hip, here, loading hip, and then on the demo, loading the hip, and then when they're ready to go, get into their throw. A little note with this last step of the rocker drill, and a little bit of a note with how pitching works. The rear foot, the one that's engaged with the rubber. A lot of kids get the wrong idea and think that it's a turning of the foot where you're kind of digging out a hole. Not so much a turn of the foot. It's going to be more a matter of this lead leg lands and braces. This trailing hip is going to get pulled up forward to meet up with this hip. What's going to happen to that back foot is actually the heel is going to get dragged off the ground, and it's going to flip over, and it's going to drag a little bit. Some kids, that back foot's going to drag 4 or 6 inches. Some kids, it's going to drag even more. If you notice that back foot is dragging a lot, you probably have some problems on the front end. We don't want that knee to push ahead of the ankle and then the hip to come forward as well. So if you notice that in doing this drill, you have a player that's really trying to load their body up, and then as they try to block or brace with that lead leg, you see that lead knee really push ahead of the ankle, and the back foot drags all the way up here. We're not doing it right. All we're doing in that moment is kind of just pushing the baseball out there. We want the lower half to load itself up, create some momentum, but then the lower half stops in place so that the lead leg kind of braces and everything above the top of it kind of tumbles over. You can think of it in terms of standing on a skateboard. Let's say you're standing on a skateboard and you give a couple pushes and then you run into a curb. The second you run into that curb, the skateboard's going to stop. Your whole body's going to tumble ahead of it. So we want to be mindful and we want to pay attention to that lead leg. Make sure it's bracing effectively. We want to pay attention to that back leg, that back foot, and see that, yeah, it's turning over, laces down, and yeah, the foot is dragging out a little bit, but it's not dragging out so much, because that's probably an indication of relying too much on just momentum. They're not properly delivering everything up the body into the baseball. So when they're done with their throw, yeah, we're going to get a bit of a toe drag. We should, hopefully we do. We don't want too much. We want that lead leg to brace nice and solid. Is the knee going to come forward a little bit? Yeah, that's okay, but we don't want that knee blowing all the way out here. So loading up those hips, breaking the hand, getting ready to deliver the baseball with a lot of force. Lead leg's going to brace, trail foot's going to turn over.